Hey friends, thanks for joining me, Jim Baroud, to hear a few insights from leaders who represent our innovation ecosystem. Today's chat is with Steve LeVine, who is the editor of The Electric, a new publication from The Information.
Thanks, and so happy to reconnect. We've known each other a long time. Then there's this whole thing with COVID, but even before that, we hadn't seen each other in a long time. So this is really good. So I specialize on the subject of batteries and electric cars, and often I get this question: how did that happen? Why are you writing about batteries? And so that's a good entryway in. So I've been a journalist my whole adult life. Most of the time I was a foreign correspondent. So I was abroad, going from region to region, country to country for 18 years. And my last foreign posting was the former Soviet Union. And I was based in what's called the stands. So all of those countries that end with the word stand. So that's Central Asia, and the Caucasus is just to the west of that. These are 8 countries. In the middle is the Caspian Sea. And when I was posted out there, there was a substantial struggle between the United States and Russia to control oil. So that was at the time when a big concern was, how do we get enough oil to run the global economy, to support civilization as we know it? And so you had this geopolitical struggle. That's how I got into the energy field. And what was the story? The story wasn't oil, it was geopolitics, energy and geopolitics. So I got all wrapped around, how does the desire among great countries to be geopolitically strong, how is that how does that play out when oil is involved, when energy is involved? And so I wrote a book about that, The Oil and the Glory, that recounts that age. And I came back to the United States, and within a few years, we had the financial crash. And you may remember that at that time, there was a lot of uncertainty. The people were really a lot of doubt because yet again, everything had crashed around us. We'd been through the dot-com bubble, the housing bubble, and now now this thing. And can we do anything in our economy that's not a shenanigan? And this was the question. And so a lot of when thinkers and people on Wall Street and Silicon Valley and so on were thinking about this, they all they coalesced around the electric car, that there was going to be a new electric car age. And this is around the world. So we're talking, Obama thought this. At that time, the leader of China was Hu, and also the prime minister of Japan. But across Europe, there was this thought, and so, that's interesting. And so, what is it all about? And it was about the battery, and I decided to write just a long magazine story about that, about batteries, and came upon one lab in Chicago, Argonne National Lab. It's famous. That's where the first nuclear experiment was done. That's how the Manhattan Project happened. Was they first Fermi did the first nuclear experiment under the football stands at the University of Chicago. And it turns out that they have the one of the world's best, and the best in the United States, battery lab. I went out there. I did this story. It did very well. I decided I was going to write a book about that. And so I embedded, those guys agreed to let me embed in their battery lab for 2 years. And I soaked up the thing. What was the story? The story was, it was still energy and geopolitics, but it's batteries and geopolitics. And so it was a struggle among countries to be the place where the super battery was invented. And if you did that, then your country would be conferred, wealth and fortunes and so on. And then the countries, who would be the losers? The losers would be petrostates who are currently reliant on the wealth from oil. So that's how I got where I am now. But along the way, I was 11 years, by the way, in the former Soviet Union, from 16 days after the collapse all the way through 2003. And then before that, I was based in Pakistan. I was a specialist on, what we now know as ISIS and Al Qaeda. When I was out there, they were just known as the Afghan Arabs. They were, it was, if you were a Muslim young man living anywhere in the world, and you wanted to do good, then what you would do is you would go to Afghanistan, and the community, the Islamic community, would pay for you to go there, and you would fight the good fight. You would fight the infidel Soviets to try to get them out of Afghanistan. So I was based out there for 3 years, and it was at that cusp, at the end, where the Soviets withdrew, and then now what do we do? And that's when you saw the Afghan Arabs morph into Al Qaeda, and everything we know that happened after that, right? They went to Bosnia, and they went out to the Middle East, and all this trouble that we still have till today. And so before I was a battery guy, before I was an oil guy, I was a jihadi guy, and that's what I was known as. And then before that, I was based in the Philippines, and I was there. Jim, you've gone dark. It's okay with me. And I was in the Philippines when the revolution happened that overthrew Ferdinand Marcos, and then the first 3 years of Corazon Aquino's presidency. That was my first time working abroad. It was a terrific 3 years, and there were 7 coup attempts against Aquino. The army overthrew Marcos, but this is sort of a truism about why, if you are the leader of a country, you do not want to come into power or stay in power based on a coup or on military help, because after they help you, they don't go away. They want to stay there, and so they couldn't stand. Right, the military grouping could not stand that Cory Aquino was the president, and thought, hey, we put you there, we belong there. So they tried 7 times to overthrow her. It didn't work. So that's the arc. I also was a journalist. My first job out of school, I lived in West Virginia, Charleston, West Virginia, for 5 years. That's where I cut my teeth, and all of those metaphors that had to do with being totally green and not knowing a damn thing, and then sort of trying to work really hard and get some skill.
Well, that is, we could spend 2 hours just on your foreign correspondent experience. That's fascinating. So just bring us up to date for the past few years. into the tech industry and
Yeah.
journalism, and then we'll get into what's new.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Thanks for asking these questions. It's always fun to tell your life story if someone ever asks you and doesn't interrupt, right? We live in a society of interrupters. No, I want to tell my story, right? Anyway, so the media industry has imploded, right? So the bottom has come out. That's how I got back to the United States. Was the Wall Street Journal pulled. I was working for the Journal in the stands, and just said, we're losing a lot of ads. We have a lot less money. We're pulling back five foreign correspondents. We're closing down Asia, and so there was an Asian Wall Street Journal. They closed it down, and so I was pulled back, and I was assigned to the Dallas bureau, and just without a job, just you're going to be in the Dallas bureau, find something to do, so that's how I got back there. What happened was there was an inflection point in 2010. At that time, I was working for Business Week in Washington. I had shifted up to Washington, and within like a few months, Business Week was bought by Bloomberg, and they no longer needed the Washington bureau. So I was out of a job. I was among the multitude of journalists who were being thrown onto the streets. But this is an interesting thing, and I think it's also instructive for journalists, and not just journalists, but people who are in industries going through transition. When I did that book, the first book, the Oil and the Glory, it was at the stage where the internet was just coming into to being a place where you wanted to do things like this, right? People had blogs, individuals, and they were blogging, and they were telling about themselves. But what's that? How do you do that? And so I found and hired a guy to show me how to blog and to get my name onto the internet. So I paid this guy. To this day, my wife gripes about what I spent. I spent $7,500 for this training, and every day for a month, this guy, we would meet on Skype, and he would message me a link to some story that was about oil or somehow about the former Soviet Union or something. Okay, read that, then write a comment about it, and then send it back to me. So quickly scan it. Okay, what do I think about this? And just write a short thing, and then send it back to him. He edited it into Netiquette, right, as a different language on the net, and then he would post it on that person's, below that person's story or blog, whatever it was. And we would do about 5 of those per day. We met for an hour every day for 30 days. At the end of that 30 days, my name was all over the place in my field, right? And so suddenly, I had a name on the internet, right? That's a big thing. And when you went on Google, your name's at the top, not on the 5th page. And I knew how to blog. So fast forward again to this Business Week thing. I resurrected the blog, right? So laid off the very next day without even thinking, just a horse will run, and a journalist will write, and so the next day I just started blogging again on this blog. It was moribund, and I got picked up. Foreign Policy magazine liked the blog and asked if I wanted, sort of a part-time gig. They absorbed that blog onto their website, and that started an 11-year journey. That's how I got into digital. I've been in digital media now for 11 years. It's crazy. I've gone from foreign policy to Quartz, Axios, Medium, and now the information. This is not intentional. I'm not promiscuous ordinarily, but this is sort of how this sort of sphere works, and each one of those was a different kind of job too. You end up broadening out, doing fields that you didn't do before. Like so at Axios, they wanted me to be a futurist and write about robots and about AI. Well, I had written exactly one story about AI and robots and the future of work. They wanted the future of work, and so I just, as you will, right? I just read everything I could on those things, talked to everyone I could, and I wrote their newsletter, The Future, yeah. And anyway, that's how I got where I am now. And now I am at The Information as of 3 weeks ago.
That's great. I'm really excited about your new newsletter. I read the first one. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Really thoughtful. So talk to us more about that and what the plan is.
Sure. Yeah. So this is the idea. The concept is that we are at the front end of a new age. It's the electrification, the new age of electrification. Remember, in the 1920s, there was an age of electrification, right? Edison lights up a building in the 1880s. That's the first time that there was commercial electricity. But it took 4 decades for that to reach the price level of ordinary people. In the 1920s, the price of electricity finally dropped so that you and I, our grandmothers, could afford it, and the things that are enabled by electricity. The toaster that toasts not just one side, both sides of the bread, the washing machine, stove, the waffle iron, all of these things that had a plug, right? Not heated over fire, but with a plug attached, and again, at a price that our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers could afford. That happened in the 1920s. And what is that? It's the age of convenience. Age of convenience was born in the 1920s, and it was an electric story. And the other thing that happened in the 1920s is the price of the automobile dropped so that we could afford that. So you had these dual ages. That all happened in the 1920s. That's where we are now. Again, 100 years later, it's the same thing. So but it's in one thing. So you got the electric car. We're at the front end. We are in the pre-game show. It looks like the show has begun. It has not. We can talk about that. We're in the pre-game show. It's going to start. Well, we can talk about that later because that's a long thing. And so this newsletter, it's around that concept that we're going to tell you about this, and we're going to cover it. It's this whole decade, and the next decade after that, this age is going to unfold. And it looks like, people talk like they know exactly what's going to happen, and they tell, okay, it's going to happen this way. No, they don't know. Everyone's guessing, but you can have an intelligent conversation around it. A lot of it has to do with human behavior. So this blog, it's about these things, and I do go into the nitty gritty, right? We go into the chemistries, the mechanics. How do you make these things work? But it's a story about cities, society, geopolitics, and it's about human behavior. And so we're going to do all that.
That's really fascinating because, as I think from what you're just talking about, this is one of the biggest industries of the future, right?
Yes.
Electricity drives everything now more and more. And then now let's just, and the historical reality of that is really fascinating too, how, Edison, I've studied Thomas Edison, and it's just fascinating how things just come full circle in some ways, right? Or history replays itself in some ways, and as we fast forward into the future. But this industry has been accelerated, right? Just like everything has been accelerated during the pandemic. Can you just take a second to talk about how the pandemic has affected this industry?
Yeah, I think that it has it's a number of things happening at once. Most of it instigated by Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla, who's our Edison of this age. But it's the last 10 months basically. Suddenly all the things that I've been describing turned into a tornado, and there's a mania has erupted. Right? So I wrote that book, The Powerhouse, that came out in 2015, and so it's 6 years, and it was crickets. Like, so people, why are you writing about that? Do you mean that Duracell that's in my drawer, and sort of like that? Because it was an aspiration. The new age was an aspiration, but over the last year, it coincided with COVID, and that's that suddenly people became cognizant that the cost of the battery had plummeted over the prior decade. There were incremental improvements every year, and people sort of said, well, okay, they're getting cheaper. But suddenly last year it goes, hey, the price is down 90%. And the cost, there's a cost and inflection point that's viewed as the inflection point when electric cars become cost equivalent to make with combustion, and that's $100 per kilowatt hour. That's the measure. How much does it cost to stuff all those electrons in that small space? And that we were very close to that. It looked like we were very close. So that happened, and then I think because people, were home and didn't have a lot of other distractions, they paid attention to that. And then in September, Musk, he decided that batteries were like Mick Jagger. And he decided to throw an event around the battery to celebrate the battery that he called Battery Day. And this is, if you think about that, that's insane. What are you're going to rent out Madison Square Garden for the battery? And are you? But he did it, right? Not Madison Square Garden. He did this out in California, and he spoke with his head of batteries for 90 minutes on a live stream about like geeking out about things that like with a vocabulary that no one talks about, but describing how he was going to, okay, the price has gone down by 90%. I'm going to bring it down another 50%. Here is how, and running through all these technologies, and like the Twitterverse went insane. I mean, this was a sensation, and so you're not in the battery universe, I think, Jim. So but there's a group, there's the battery universe, and then around it arose tens of thousands of voyeurs. Like, I wrote a story about this at Medium, and there were. It's the most, well, no, the second most. I'll tell you what the most was because it happened just 2 weeks later. But the second most traffic that I got on any story at Medium was over 300,000 unique visitors to that story. That means that they're the battery guys, the few thousand people working on batteries, and then in this case, hundreds of thousands of voyeurs who just, what's this all about, sort of thing. And so that happened during COVID. I think that it was a reflection of Musk and his convening power. It was that an inflection point had happened, so there was substance. And three, there's something about the COVID period that has accelerated already existing trends, and this was one of them. The other one I just mentioned, that there was another story at the same time. Another thing that's been a triggering mechanism for this period of mayhem, battery mayhem, and that's that there is this holy grail technology that in the battery field they've been trying to solve from the time that the lithium battery was invented. It was invented at Exxon, by the way. Exxon invented it in the 1970s, but it kept exploding in the lab. They kept having to call the fire department, and finally the fire department, hey, can you guys like not do this? And so they did. They stopped. That isn't exactly why they stopped, but it's one of the reasons Exxon stopped. But trying to fix that problem, that's a half century ago. That problem of exploding batteries, and that's from the lithium metal that's inside the battery. How do we use lithium metal, get all that energy out of it, but not cause a fire? A company called QuantumScape came out of stealth that same September, like within 2 weeks of Musk with his battery day, and said, "Hey, we figured it out, and we're going public. We're going to list in a SPAC, one of these things, and let me tell you about it, right?" And so, for unknown reasons, it was a huge. I wrote about that, and that was way over 300,000 unique visitors. And why would so many people not prepped, right? They weren't briefed beforehand that you should pay attention to this. It somehow caught the imagination. So you have these two things, Musk and his battery thing, and then you've got lithium metal becoming real. And those two things have driven, that's why we've got this SPAC mania. 24 battery and EV companies have listed on the stock exchanges. It's pretty crazy. They're not all going to survive.
And that is one of the highlights of your piece, which is really illuminating, right? I mean, the all these companies and all around batteries, and that's really literally and figuratively going to drive this industry is battery technology. And I think it's all behind the scenes, but now it's been brought to the fore. And right. But you talk about other things like China, you talk about the automobile industry. Love to get your take on, give us sort of an update on how you're thinking geopolitically, which obviously is your background.
Yeah. So as it stands, China spent the last 10 years. So we got in, the United States got into the game. Elon Musk started the age, and then there was a small grouping of companies that grew up around that in the late aughts and then the early part of the teens. But they fell away. And we gave up. We more or less gave up on the battery, but the Chinese didn't. And so they spent the last 10 years working on their batteries and putting public policy behind creating a battery industry, creating an EV industry. And what's that all about? That's about a supply chain. It's about having yourself all set up from the mines where they mine the metals. And this is like cobalt, nickel, manganese, lithium, stuff like that. And then bringing all that home, refining it into a form that can be used, and then a chemical companies that turn this into the electrodes and the and the separators, all the parts that go into the battery. It's very simple, just 3 or 4 parts. That's an expertise. Like doing what I just described, that takes years to perfect. Like getting those formulas exactly right, and then moving from the scale of your thumbnail up to many tons of this material, which is what is needed to make these batteries. That's like surgery. Those guys who do this, they really know what they're doing. This should be your next field, so they did all that. So they established that whole edifice of the sort of the middle industry between the mine and the car, and then they incentivized their car industries. Like at one time, there were 600 EV companies in China. Obviously, then Xi Jinping recently said, that's too many, and now there are 200. It's crazy. He can just say that, and suddenly, hundreds of companies vanish. But that's what happens when you're running the show. So geopolitically, China is in the catbird seat, but Europe and the United States want to be in the game. So the EU, since 2017, but really for the last couple of years, has put their whole government process behind ginning up their battery making chain. The same thing I described in China, they want that in Europe, and so they've been doing that successfully. Our image of Europe is of this great place to visit, but totally slow moving, and there are no no Elon Musks out there, and we've got 2 or 3 guys who are going into space, and there aren't any in Europe like that. But they formed a couple of really kick-ass, I'm assuming I can use that language on your podcast, battery companies. One is called Freyr, that's in Norway, and then there's Northvolt, which is in Sweden. I pause because I mix those up sometimes and swap with the wrong country. And but they're building up their own gigafactories, they're called, right? Musk named them. A gigafactory is a large battery factory, and they're building their own there. And so so the most electric cars in the world as of last year are sold in Europe, and that's because of this public policy thing around climate change, right? About zero emissions cars. And so it's forcing the car companies in Europe to produce these cars and do them in a way that people buy them. And then the United States, Biden has proposed $174 billion to jumpstart, if we can use that word, a U.S. battery industry. And we need to do this. Like this is like, we politicize everything, right? Everything somehow gets attached to one political party or the other. Folks, this is not politics. It's geopolitics. Do you want to be a player in this industry of the future or not? And do you want the things that will be conferred by being a piece of this? And that's wealth, it is jobs, and it's the bragging rights. And so we should do this. So we're as it is right now, we are like way behind the curve, and which is so sad, because the battery formulations, every single one of the commercial battery formulations, were either invented in the United States or by an American working abroad. So we invented this stuff, but it's outside where the wealth is being created around them.
That's really interesting. As you talk about it, you talk about the hundreds of companies in China, right? History repeating itself. when the nascent car industry, you hear 100 years ago, there were hundreds of car manufacturers as well, right? And then there was a winnowing. Now, bringing that to today, about our domestic manufacturers, right? The other day, I just posted that the Mustang Mach-E won the EV car of the year from Car and Driver, which I thought was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I think obviously late start, but domestic companies or companies in general, legacy companies, as you call them, are coming around to it. How do you envision that race, for the automobile? And, I worked in this industry many, many years ago, and it's just the amount of respect I have for Tesla and Elon Musk, coming out of the gate with the Model S and, just blowing away the competition in so many ways.
Yeah.
And really, accelerating the industry is really astonishing. But give us an update on the industry in general, how you see it.
Yeah. And do you mean the global industry, or you mean the U.S. industry?
Well, talk about global, and then, let's segue into domestic, because a lot of the listeners are domestic and concerned about this industry.
Yeah. So the way it stands is that, of course, Tesla dominates right now. And so, but, by far sells more electric vehicles every year, every quarter than anyone else, except for there's this little car that's about as big as your dinner table that is sold in China that actually sells the most. It costs like $2,000, but you can fit you and your dog in it, and so I mean the ones that a family will buy, like those. So Tesla, but who apart from Tesla is taking this seriously? VW. So VW is the other really big company to watch. So it has survival reasons for doing this. Remember, it was caught faking its emissions with its diesel run cars. It installed a device in all of its cars to fool emissions detectors. It's called Dieselgate, and it cost them billions of dollars. The executives who are responsible are under criminal indictment in Europe for this, and the company, there was a threat that the company may not survive. And the way that VW and its image, right? Its image, especially in its its most important market is Europe, was trashed, right, by this. And so it was equivalent to like Exxon, with the Exxon Valdez oil spill. When that happened, it really hurt Exxon's public image. And so VW has done this pivot, and it's made itself into the electric car company, and it is like deadly serious. Like over $100 billion they have either spent or committed to this, to transitioning the company. And they okay, you're right, the Mach-E is a wonderful vehicle, and I haven't driven one, but those who have just can't stop talking about it. The way it looks, the way it drives, everything that's in it, and so on. That's the Ford really did a good job. But Volkswagen, the Volkswagen Group, they own Audi, they own Porsche, the Porsche Taycan. People love this car, right? It's a sports car. So so anyway, that's a company to watch, and GM at the was very early, right? So they put out in 2010, I think it was, or 2011, 2012, in that area. Maybe it was a 2011 car. The Volt, right? The GM Volt was a hybrid, a plug-in hybrid. It had a big battery that took you 40 miles, and then an engine for when that went out. That that was Motor Trend Car of the Year 2 years in a row. I mean, that was a serious car. And then, the biggest selling Tesla is the Model 3. Well, GM has the Bolt. The Bolt beat the Model 3 by 7 months. It was on the market 7 months before the Model 3. So GM, that's it. That's all they did. The Volt and the Bolt, and that was it. And they just and they didn't advertise them. They didn't promote them. And so why, Musk is standing on stage all the time in his black t-shirts and getting the crowd, the Steve Jobsian events, getting people going and tweeting, and you guys are not doing anything. What's that all about? And so no one took them seriously. But in this, you asked what happened during the age of COVID. GM happened. So GM said, shit, this is happening and we're not in it. And they just put their engineers to work and came out and Mary Barra, the CEO, says, our aim is to sell no more combustion cars after the year 2035. That's their aim. And they've committed $30 billion by 2025 for their spending. And they say they're going to have 30 vehicles, 30 EVs on the market by 2025 in just 4 years. And really, it's 3 years because remember, cars are put on the market a year before the actual date. And so that's pretty soon. And so GM, but here's where they fall and the difference between GM and VW. VW says, not only are we putting these cars on the market, we're going to build 6 gigafactories, these big battery factories, just in Europe. That's serious. That's saying, so we not only are saying that we've designed and we're going to put these cars on the market, which doesn't really, that's not a commitment, right? That's right. But because you can do like what they did with the Volt and the Bolt and produce, a few hundred cars, a few thousand cars, which isn't very much. But building a gigafactory, like you got to spend the money. You're spending the money. You're building this. You're saying, I am betting on this new age. I am putting my money where my mouth is. VW, that's what they're doing, right? They're saying we're getting ahead of the demand. We're so serious that we're going to build these factories before the demand arrives. This is what GM is not doing. So it's doing it a little bit, right? Like a factory here, a factory there. They're built by the South Koreans, which is fine. South Korea, it might as well be part of the American team, right? So, the US wants to be a player. Well, be a player like we've always been as a nation, right? We're a nation of immigrants. We invite people from any part of the world to come in and be part of the economy. Well, let's have our arms around the South Koreans. They mastered the battery. They are one of the big players. So let's bring them in. And anyway, so GM has made them part of their team. Another, just Ford. What about Ford? Is really late. So it's done the Mustang and the F-150, best-selling vehicle of any type for 40 years. It's pickup truck. My brother owns 2 of them. There's no reason for him to own this truck. He carts around like a pencil, his notebook, but it's a cultural thing. People want to own these, right? And he wanted 2 of them. But they want to get into the electric age. So they've made an electric F-150, but that's basically it. So they've got these 2 things. They've recently discovered, like in the last few months, oh, you know what? Maybe the electric age is going to happen. They were telling me just a few months ago, we're going to take it slow. We're going to We're going to keep making combustion for the people who want combustion, and we're going to make the light hybrids for those people, and we'll make some electrics. Let's see how the market goes. That's what they were saying just a few months ago. Something happened, and I think it was Mary Barra. I think they said, "Oh, GM is doing that." You know how people are. They suddenly see their neighbor doing it, and say, "Maybe I ought to be doing it too." And suddenly you see, like every 2 or 3 weeks, Ford is making another announcement. How we're investing 20 billion. No, we're investing 25 billion. No, we're investing 30 billion. And now they're building a gigafactory. And so, but it's hard to take them seriously. It's hard to take Ford seriously. But that's sort of a light description of the sort of the high points.
That was really great. So for us car buyers, share with us just one thing we should have on our minds as we look to the future and consider electric vehicles.
Yeah. So the thing to know is I mentioned that we're in the pre-game, but the thing to know is the year 2025. So your whole the context of what's going on in your mind should be fixed on that date. That is a convergence point around 2025. So that year, 2024, 2026, but let's say for simplicity's sake, 2025, that's when everyone, I don't think they had a big meeting, all the car companies in Geneva or something, and all the battery companies decide, hey, let's do this in 2025. But effectively, that's what they did. All of the battery companies, all of the car companies, they all announced, we're going to have this product in mid-decade. The costs of the car are going to be reduced to the same price as gasoline run vehicles in the mid-decade. So what does that mean if you're a car buyer? It means that the vehicles that you're seeing today, the price is going to go down. Right? So the car makers, their costs will go down, and we're assuming that they'll pass on at least some of the savings and maybe all the savings, and have it reflected in the sticker price. So people actually buy these vehicles. So if I were you, if you're in the market, like, do not buy an electric car right now unless your grandmother left you a ton of money and you don't know what to do with it, and you're just going to spend it. Like, lease a car and electric car, see what you think, but hold on to what you've got now if you can, or lease, and know that in a few short years, in the 2024 models, but especially the 2025 models and beyond, that's where you're going to see lower prices and much more selection. And it's going to be like a supermarket. And that's the context. That's the concept. This age of electrification, the starting gun is 2025. And we're before the starting guns. We're wandering around the stands, buying our hot dogs, taking our seats, and to watch the show. And it begins in 2025, and then it goes into the 2030s, into the 2040s.
That was great, Steve. Thanks for that. Now, put on your crystal, look at the crystal ball. How do you, I know it's hard to predict, but we think Tesla's stock price is amazing. They're doing great now. They're the leader. How do you see things shaking out? Do you see an equalization? What's your gut say? As impossible as it is to predict.
You mean for these companies? Yeah,
for the auto industry. Yeah, the companies, competition.
I think so. What I hear, and I think it's correct, is not everyone we see today is going to survive, and it's not. We don't know who is not going to survive, but they won't. And that's in the legacy industry, and that's in the startup industry. So one thing to know about batteries is it is historically rife with exaggeration and fraud. And so so Edison said this. That's where this axiom comes from. He wrote it in a magazine called electrician. He was trying to find a battery for an electric car, and he expressed his annoyance in print about how like almost everyone who came to him when he checked what they had promised, it wasn't true. And so he called, as soon as someone gets into batteries, no sooner do they become a liar. He used this. So what does it mean? It means that the lineup we're looking at today, someone's not telling the truth, someone's exaggerating, or more than one person. Those people are going to fall out. So we're going to watch that happen. But I think so. There's going to be some equalization, as you put it. Tesla is not going to sell all of the EVs, but I think Tesla has a running head start, and they have the pizzazz around them. They have the halo around them. People like it's like a iPhone, right? So I own an Android, but everyone else in my family owns it. They wouldn't even think about it. They get angry if I mention, why don't you look at another phone like that? That's heresy. So that's the way people are about Teslas too. But these other VW, this is a killer company. They're in this to survive, and they're going to. I think GM is like that too. And so I think these are the main companies. But I think that the Toyota is hanging back. It's the last one, big company. It's back there with its arms crossed like this. No, we don't see it yet. We're not going in yet. So they're producing some electric cars, but they're talking like Ford, the way I described Ford a few months ago. It's still Toyota, which is something. They're the biggest car company in the world. But what about the Chinese? So the Chinese, NIO, Xpeng, Li, BYD, the best batteries in the world, the most exciting batteries in the world are produced by BYD. And CATL, this is the biggest battery company in the world, Chinese, CATL. So we're going to see, even though it looks crazy right now, we're going to be driving Chinese cars. Like they're going to be in the United States. NIO, some people will buy NIO, and so that's a surprising thing, right? They're going to be in the mix. That, I guess that's my answer. That's how I sort of see it playing out.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Now, what about the charging stations, right? Now, Tesla has a huge head start. How do you think the solution will evolve for the rest of the industry? Will there be a consortium so that they can scale as quickly as possible, or how do you see it, scattered around the U.S. and around the world?
Yeah, as it stands, we have our mentality is a gas station mentality, and our parents also had that, and our grandparents. So this is already built into our DNA that we expect to be able to get up in the morning. We forgot to put gas in our car, but we have a meeting and we're 10 minutes late. We're not worried because we know there's a gas station. We know that there's going to be an empty pump. We can get in there and in like 3 minutes, pump in 10 gallons and be on our way, right? So that's our mentality. And so people will not. The first thing to know about vehicles is that in the United States is that women make most of the decisions about car buying. This is sort of it's true, but most people don't recognize this. Is that in families is that women are known are like this is like papers have been written about this. Women are the deciders, and so are women going to even consider even looking at an electric vehicle if they think they're not going to be able to charge it up, or if they're worried they're not going to be able to charge it up fast, right? They don't want to sit around. No one does want to sit around a gas station, a charging station for 2 hours or 8 hours for a complete fill up. So there has to be for this age to work, have to be almost ubiquitous charging network. And what does that look like? That looks like that subconsciously, as we're just driving around doing our thing, it becomes part of the landscape. We just notice, I noticed there's a charging station. So when you're sitting, you don't have to look for it, you just know it. And they're fast charging. It says fast, right? And so what is fast? 15 minutes? I think 15 minutes. People will become accustomed to this, right? They'll get out of their car, they'll check their email, whatever, get back in and load up 150 miles in 15 minutes and then be on their way. So that has to be there. So what you're describing, this has to happen. And there has to be standardization. So it can't be that I can't drive into Electrify America or EV Go or even Tesla into one of their charging points and use my, plug it into my car. I got to be able to plug. Imagine if the gasoline pump, if you could only go to, Exxon stations, right? Because the other ones don't fit your Volkswagen, right? And so they have to standardize. So that I think that this will happen. So will there be a consortium? There are consortia that are forming, right? Like there are alliances forming, but by that convergence point, by 2025, this age does not happen unless there is what I described, that landscape. At least it doesn't have to be fully filled out, but there has to be some semblance of it. If you want people to walk, if you want women to walk into those showrooms.
Yeah, no, that's really that makes a lot of sense, right? It has to be easy and ubiquitous. Even though, as you say in your article, most people will just charge overnight, right? It's become so, we've changed our patterns, right? You just
that is what it may come to that. So we don't know what's going to happen. What we know, all of the data that we have right now are based on first movers. People who have bought electric vehicles, they're like, 30, 40 years ago, they are the teenagers or the people in their 20s who went around to 15 electronic stores and bought parts and put together a computer at home. But most people aren't like that. They want to buy the whole laptop as a piece and come home and turn it on. And so the people who are describing a future of everyone charging up overnight, they are the kid putting together the electronics kit. That's not real. That's not the real people. And so maybe people will fully charge at home, but maybe they also will be the guy who wakes up in the morning with the tank empty, forgot to fill it up, and has a meeting in 10 minutes.
Right. That makes sense. So, Steve, this has been really great. This has been just really interesting and informative. And I look forward to learning more about this industry and being engaged with you. Tell folks how to, be better informed about the electric industry going forward.
Yeah. So if you would, we are right now, we've got a pilot going on right now, and it's going on for 8 weeks. And this is important because it's informing me, like what's working and what's not working, and what interests people. So I would really be grateful if you sign up for this pilot. It's totally free. So it's the information, that's the company, and then the name of the publication is The Electric. Totally easy, the usual spelling. And so you can find it, the information and the electric, you just put in your email address and you'll start getting it every Sunday, and alerts during the week. That's what you do. And maybe Jim will be good enough to put the link also where you find this podcast.
Absolutely, Steve. We will do that. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to your future insights.
Thanks so much, Jim.
Thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please like it, leave a review, and subscribe. See you soon.